Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good moment to you, wherever you are. Welcome to my meditation journey with neuroscientist Dr. Amishi Jha and Tergar's own Dr. Cortland Dahl in conversation on the science of focus in a distracted world. My name is Beth. I'm a Tergar staff member. And on behalf of my colleagues, Jiva and Lucy, we want to welcome you to today's program. More than 3,500 people from all over the world have registered for this event, which is being streamed on YouTube. Everybody's watching on YouTube today. And please feel free to post in the chat stream there, letting us know where you're joining from. We'd love to see those. At the end of today's conversation, there will be some time for audience questions. So please submit your questions using the our special Q&A form. And there's a QR code on the screen right now that you can scan to submit your questions, or we'll be putting the link to that form in the YouTube chat. Please keep your questions concise and to the point of today's conversation. And now I'd like to welcome scientist, translator, author, and meditation teacher, Tergar International's executive director, Dr. Cortland Dahl. Hi, Cortland.
Hey, Beth. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, from tuning in from around the world. It is a true pleasure and an honor to be here today with Dr. Amishi Jha, who's going to join in just a second. I'm just going to take a few moments to introduce her amazing career and then also just share a personal story about how the two of us met, because we thought it would be a good way to kick things off. So Dr. Jha is really one of the true pioneers of modern neuroscience, not only our understanding of attention, resilience, and how we can train ourselves to experience more peak performance in our minds, you might say, how to be more balanced and really be at our very best, even in stressful situations. But she's especially been a pioneer in bringing these insights and teachings and ancient practices into entirely new areas of our society. Everything from athletes to the military to corporate leaders and everywhere in between. And as you'll see, she's also just a delightful human being, incredibly wise. She has written a best-selling book, Peak Mind. She has a YouTube video a TED video with more than 5 million views, and a new app that she recently designed called Push-Ups for the Mind. So she's truly a pioneer and doing a lot of really important, insightful work in the world. So Amishi, thank you if you want to hop on here. So great to have you with us. Thank you for taking the time to join us.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to be here, Court.
So Amishi and I first met a long time ago, almost 20 years ago. Normally, I wouldn't start something like this with a personal story, but actually, Amishi made such an incredible impact on my own mind. There's actually a moment that I really will never forget. So we actually met at a gathering of the Mind and Life Institute. I think it was somewhere around 2007, 2008. And Amishi was one of the presenters. I was just in the audience, along with a lot of other people in the Mind and Life community. And Amishi was presenting on her work at that time. I had heard about this. Some of her early work was with the U.S. military, and in particular with pre-deployment soldiers. And if I'm totally honest, I was actually really skeptical and had a lot of questions about that. And honestly, I had kind of a negative view of it, if I'm totally honest. And I listened to Amishi's presentation. The data that she showed was really inspiring. It was really cool, innovative research. But actually, it was the stories that Amishi told, the experience of the soldiers, the deep suffering, how it had helped them, how it really just not only brought more mindfulness and awareness, but more kindness, more compassion, more insight and wisdom into this incredibly fraught sector of our world and our society. And actually, I cried. I think it was the only scientific presentation I've ever been at where I genuinely cried. I'm not exaggerating at all, and not just me. I think there were not a lot of dry eyes in the room. Just the stories were so moving. I'll never forget that, actually, Amishi. And it was moving then. I still think about it now. I talk about it, when I present myself. So that was just, you've done so much work since then as well. Just want to thank you for everything you've done and doing such important work and not being afraid to kind of push the boundaries, and to have, to work that is challenging in many ways. So why don't I'd love to just kick this off just with your personal reflections. Like, how did you get started? Did this start for you more as a professional scientific interest or personal or both? How did you even get started down this path?
Thank you for, first of all, for sharing um, that moment. And I think what I love about it, before we get into my story, is it's like you were seeing your own neuroplasticity in action, right? You came in with a set of views, and something about an experience started shifting the way you thought about it. And I hope that if anybody holds views similar to yours, or there are service members, people that have served, no matter your whatever country you're in, that you'll also have that sort of shifting experience to open your heart and to open your mind in ways if you're listening today. So I just want to invite everybody into that conversation, into our conversation. In terms of my own journey, yeah, it was a very interesting kind of dual pathway. But for sure, I would say the whole thing started as a personal journey. And you were recounting something that happened 20 something years ago, almost 20 years ago. My journey with my own personal practice in a real dedicated way happened just a little bit before that, actually, probably in the early 2000s. 2003, I would say, is probably the first time. And I know this time range because it was a very intense and fraught time for me in some sense, and a wonderful time as well. So this was right when I'd started my very first faculty position at the University of Pennsylvania. And I had just had my first child, started a new lab, moved to a new city. My husband was starting graduate school at the same time. He was getting a master's degree. We had bought a 100-year-old fixer-upper. I was, having my first graduate students. It was like the perfect storm of everything that we wanted to have happen in our lives was happening in that time. And it was a very busy time as well. And I remember just my own commitment as a parent was, no matter the busyness, when I come home in the evening, I will be, no matter what time, it will happen that my son and I will sit together and I will read to him as we get ready for his bedtime, right? This was just like a personal thing. I looked forward to this time every day. At some point when he was probably toddler age range, I remember sitting there during those times and I'm reading something in a book and he asked me a question about it, and it kind of stops the page and looks up at me and asks me a question. And I had no idea what he was talking about. No idea. And that was sort of a very uncomfortable moment where I'm like, oh my goodness, I devote my day so that I can have this time. Yet here I am with him, but not actually here. And the reason I missed what he said was because my mind, though my words were being read, my mind was able to read the words. I was doing that mindlessly. And soon after that, I started getting the hints that this is very bad. Like I'm checked out more than I want to be. Soon after that, I had a kind of a more profound experience with that. I had lost feeling in my teeth from grinding. And this was a very like, oh, I guess I'm kind of stressed. So this is all snowballing where I'm starting to feel more and more that it's not just my distractibility. Now it's moving into a mood issue where I'm not feeling good either. And yet the external circumstances, though filled with a lot of demand, were essentially what I wanted them to be in my life. I wanted all those
Yeah,
things.
you're amazingly successful. Everything seems on the outside sounds like it's going amazingly.
Yeah, but it kind of bugged me. I'm an attention researcher. Why can't I, if I know all these things about attention, I literally spend my daytime studying the way the brain pays attention. Why can't I just solve this problem of not being as distracted and not having my mood be negatively impacted? And it was sort of happening in that way. I'm going to kind of continue with the personal story, then I want to bring in sort of what was happening at the lab at the same time. So this, just to cut to the chase, so all of this is happening, and I was very, very fortunate in the middle of all this that we had a guest speaker one time for a seminar at the University of Pennsylvania, who was Richie Davidson. And Richie was giving this talk about the neuroscience of emotion, et cetera. And at the end of his talk, this, by the way, was before he was really publicly not talking about the mindfulness work. In fact, the Center for Healthy Minds didn't exist. He was just returning from his work in the 70s to studying mindfulness. And some of the first studies had been done, but it was not public. So he's giving us a more standard academic talk on the brain science of emotion. And he ends the talk with this sort of very kind of provocative set of images, which is two brain images. One that is a study in which participants had been induced through various means, reflections of personal memories, et cetera, to be in a negative mood. And another condition in which they were induced to be in a positive mood. And his point, when you looked at the brain scans, was that, look, just the nature of how we hold our emotion, negative or positive, changes the way the brain is functioning. And it was a profound thing to say from a scientific point of view, and capturing that was very, very powerful. But given my personal circumstances, I read it a little differently. And at the end of the seminar, I was actually one of the last, I think I might have been the very last question. I raised my hand because I still had that slide on the screen. And I said, I have one question for you. How do I get that brain, pointing to the negative one, to look like that brain, which was the positive one, which was essentially what I was looking for in my,
so simple,
in my
but
own
so true,
life.
yeah.
And he, I don't know, it was partly because he was rushed, it was the end of the seminar, and he just said out loud, kind of yelling at me in the back of the room, meditation. And I was kind of like, what? What? At that moment, it was like, we don't say that word in this community. Where do you think you are? Have you lost reference point? You know, it was such a shock to me that he would say this
And for
word.
everybody
Now,
listening, like we're at Penn, like this is one of like the top places really on the, like for this field of research, this is like one of the top places on the planet, when it comes to psychology and emotion. So this is not just anywhere that he's saying this, like this is kind of
it's not anywhere that he's saying it, and he's saying it at a time when it was not the current moment. We didn't, literally, it was the first time I'd ever heard of it in my professional life, that somebody's using this term in a scientific talk. Now, you can see me, I'm an Indian woman. Of course I've heard the word meditation. My earliest memories are of my my father meditating, and it bugged, I mean, it was a shock to me from a scientist, as a scientist, that he said that. But the other part of it that bugged me was like, oh, I don't like that word. And I will just, again, you asked me about my personal reflections. Part of the reason I had kind of a thing against meditation was that, as an Indian woman, as somebody who's heard this in her culture, I knew it was an important thing to do. I also felt like it was not something that I would want to do from a kind of a serious scientific perspective. But more than that, it was this sense that meditation is not something that a lot of women are welcomed into within the Indian tradition. I mean, it felt like it was sort of a sexist feeling of, this is not, this is for men. And I had like sort of a lot of different layers to what you're asking, but essentially I was really sort of anti meditation, which I never knew, and also just didn't think it was serious. But Richie saying that kind of stopped me in my tracks. He and I had a chance to talk later. He shared with me some of the very compelling early work that was happening. And it was strong enough of an impulse where this respected colleague was saying this to me, not from sort of the personal perspective, because I didn't share more with him about that, but just what was happening and the value of it that he saw, that it got me to walk down to the Penn bookstore, go into the section that said meditation, and look for a book to grab it. And that book happened to be Meditation for Beginners by Jack Kornfield. It was this little tiny book that came with a CD. And I said, okay, fine, kind of grudgingly, like, well, this respected colleague says maybe I should be open to this. I started practicing the practices that were in there. And within a couple of months, things really started shifting. And nothing really from the external circumstances had shifted, but I could feel that I was more present. I was more embodied. I could see the micro expressions on my child's face or my husband's face. And I felt like I had returned to my life wholly different, even though externally everything was the same. And I credit it really to the transformation that was happening with my daily practice. So that's sort of the professional, the personal line. I'll just say quickly about the professional line. At the same time, in my lab, we had been studying the brain's attention system and understanding its power. I mean, so much so that we call it the brain's boss. And I had been on the hunt for ways in which we could break this very powerful system. So the early studies we were doing in my lab were, you might say they were kind of mean to the participants, but really it was an intention, all ethics approved, to see how far, what we'd need to do in order for people to have their attention start failing. So we would do things in the lab like stress them out, say, go faster, you're not going fast enough, as they were doing an attention task. Or we would induce them into a mood state that would produce sort of a negative emotion and have them do an attention task. Or we might even do something that was a little bit threatening from a social perspective, where we'd say things like, as they were performing the task, give them feedback that would be like, you're performing worse than anybody that's ever performed this task, psychosocial threat. So we were seeing that this was absolutely working. When you stress people out, when you put them in a negative mood, when you threaten them, their attention starts to fall and break and become vulnerable. So at the same time I'm seeing these conditions happen, I'm experiencing some of those conditions. And I, from my own journey, realized, there is something you can do about this. And that there was a real aha moment I had where I'm like, you know what? We're going to study this. We're going to study this to see how it might protect and strengthen attention. And it was within a few, maybe more months of that I wrote my first National Institutes of Health grant to see how attention may be strengthened by mindfulness meditation. And that journey has really not stopped till this day. I'm still doing that kind of work. So that's
on
where
behalf of humanity,
both
I'm glad it didn't stop, because you've had so many important, interesting discoveries.
Yeah, thank you for asking
people,
that. Yeah.
What do you think people, from a lifetime of studying attention? You just mentioned a few of the kind of important facts that are just relevant for just real world experience. Like if you're stressed out, your attention is going to suffer, and then that spills over into all sorts of other areas. From a lifetime of studying attention, what do you think people should know about just the basic mechanics of attention, in terms of how, to just be a student of your own mind and manage your own mind? What do you think are the most important things to know, coming from your and other research in this area?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I say that term attention, most of the time people say, oh, focus, narrow, direct, almost like just get yourself on the task and do it. Will yourself to be narrowly constrained in what you're trying to do. And that is part of attention. Being able to focus is certainly part of attention, but that is not the entirety of what attention is. Attention is a complex, multifaceted system, and it really has to do with prioritizing some information over other information. And part of the power of attention, because it really is a powerful brain system, what we pay attention to and the way in which we pay attention transforms sort of moment by moment the configuration of how the brain is operating. It biases information processing in the brain to highlight whatever it is that we are prioritizing. So it could be that we are narrow and focused in the way that we want to use our attention. And I use this metaphor of a flashlight, like if you're in a darkened room, or a torch, depending on the part of the world that you live in. But you can also have your attention be broad and receptive. And what you're privileging then is not so much about the content, not about narrowing in on something in particular, but the moment. Right now, I need to be situationally aware. Anything that happens in this moment, I should be attentive to. And also that we can bias our attention system based on the goals that we have. The internally held present moment goal that we hold for what we want to get done can change the way we pay attention. So the main thing I think I would say is important to know is that attention is multifaceted, that it is actually quite powerful in terms of how it functions in the brain. And this is, I think, probably the more important thing to say, it's what we call domain general, meaning that it is a resource in our brain. It is a process that the brain has inherited through the course of human evolution to prioritize some information over other information that influences very specific kinds of things the brain does. So, for example, our ability to think is determined by our attention. And what do I mean by that? Well, at the granular level, if a thought arises in your mind, and then another thought, and another thought, the only way those thoughts are able to have continuity, sort of a train of thought, if you will, is to have them hyperlinked through our attention. So thinking is served by attention, just fueled by attention. Same thing with our emotions. Our ability to experience an emotion and regulate emotion requires attention. And same goes with our social functioning. Even right now, looking at your face, seeing it as having this communication, it's a social act that requires my attention. So we need our attention to think, feel, and connect. So that's very important, I think, just that it's multifaceted, it's used for multiple things. And then the final thing I'll just say is that our attention is incredibly fragile. Even though we can use it in this devoted way, it will get distracted, it will get overwhelmed, it will, the goal will evaporate. And that fragility is part of the reason I started wanting to offer mindfulness training, frankly, to the kinds of communities that I work with. Because if stress, threat, and negative mood, for example, can break attention, can really cause it to fail, then you want to make sure, at least I felt like we want to make sure that anybody, any profession in which stress, threat, and negative mood are not just part of the ups and downs of all of our lives, but it's the context in which these professionals might have to do not only their jobs, but the very best job that they can do. And I think about things like what firefighters do, running into the burning building. Or what
It is the
emergency
job. It's not like an aberration.
It is
and
the
they're
job.
like,
Or
it's part of it.
emergency room physicians, like, take care of me in this moment. We rely on them as a society, as a world, to do their jobs well. And their attention is vulnerable because of the circumstances in which they should need to operate. So to know that attention is powerful, to know that it's vulnerable, to know that it's trainable, these are all the things that I think are important for folks to know, and to feel empowered that we are all in that position. We are all capable of strengthening our attention.
It's so interesting hearing you talk about this, because it just brings back a lot of memories from when I was learning to meditate myself. I was a college student at the University of Minnesota, also studying psychology, and Minnesota had a really great psychology department at the time, and I was working in a lab, super interested in that, and at the same time I was super stressed out and overwhelmed. And in particular, I had a phobia of public speaking, like a genuine phobia.
Really?
I was
You've
so
come a long way, baby.
yeah, I mean, it's great. I never would have believed I'd do stuff like this professionally. I would get so nervous. I literally fainted on stage in high school in a choir concert. I was so worked out. So I'm like,
oh my goodness,
I'm not joking. I had like a genuine phobia. But a lot of the things you just pointed to were so much part of just like the inner landscape of my experience when I started to meditate. I don't think it was so clear then, but looking back on it, I was just doing very basic mindful breathing practices at the time. It was quite just, your mind gets distracted, back to the breath, very simple. But at the same time, I was in class and doing the academic stuff. I was also working in a sushi restaurant, kind of earning money through college. And I remember actually, for example, being in the restaurant, because I was meditating, I was just paying attention to what was going on in my mind more. And I noticed that in the restaurant, unlike in meditation, where I had this more narrowed field of attention, in the restaurant, I needed to have a very expansive, you need to see the whole restaurant. You can't just be so focused on table 9 and you forget about, table 3 in the corner. You need to kind of, even if you're attending to one thing, you kind of have to have enough of your attention free that the field is sort of a little bit wider and more expansive. And I just noticed that and noticed that it wasn't like I just needed to be laser focused all the time. What I needed was to be attending to my own mental state so it could adapt to the context,
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, in a social situation, it's one thing. If you're working in a restaurant like that, it's another thing. In class, I noticed a certain way, if I could be very attending, not like laser focused, but have a stable attention, I noticed my memory increased dramatically. So there was something that I just noticed in my own experience between attention and memory. I just noticed all these things, and it was all coming from this very basic act of paying attention to what was going on in my mind. And so a lot of the things that you're saying from a scientific perspective, it was so much part of my experience at the time. It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you described it. And you described the practice, the sort of mindfulness of breathing practice, as a simple practice. But what you were doing in the practice, if it was something like pay attention to the sensations of the breath wholly, fully, notice when my mind has wandered away, And when I do bring it back, that act of doing that is what I would call the mental reps, the workout
Yeah.
of attention. And what happens through that is that we are essentially engaging all of these three ways of paying attention. We are narrow and focused when we hold the breath as our target or anchor. We are kind of broad and receptive when we're noticing where the mind is to be able to catch when it might have been gone off track. And we are dedicated and being goal focused when we bring the attention back to the breath when we are. And exercising our attention in that way is able to do all the things you said. With that capacity of a stronger attention system, we can change the aperture, whether it's narrow or broad. We can use it to devote to the external environment and look internally. And we can much more readily kind of check in with what the mind is doing. We can cultivate, this term, meta awareness, or awareness of our attention, or in some sense, not even of our attention, of all the mental processes that are unfolding moment by moment. So I love that you shared that, because it wasn't like you said, I went on a 5-year retreat and then I returned and I could see the whole restaurant. It was a small practice you did every day, but it was a profoundly complex and impactful practice when it comes to your brain functioning. So
Yeah, exactly. And remembering it in many ways, when I think about those early days meditating, my 20 minutes of meditation in the morning mostly was just distraction, if I'm totally honest. I wasn't like some super meditator. But I think what I was doing was remembering that throughout the day. So when I'm sitting in class and I notice my attention drifting from back in the era of blackboards and old school education, or being in the restaurant and just noticing when my mind was not fully there with what I was doing. It was as much as the formal practice, it was those little moments that just remembering to bring it in throughout the day. I'm curious
sorry, one
please.
thing I want to just follow up with that. The way that I describe what you call as the mindfulness of breath, I think you described it that way, the practice, I call it the find your flashlight practice. So essentially, it's not just about holding the flashlight and devoting our flashlight, but part of it is, it's like knowing where it is. And what
remembering
might
you're
be
actually
experienced.
remembering you have a flashlight and it's pointed somewhere,
Remembering you
whether
have
you're
a
doing it on
flashlight.
purpose or
So
not.
what you experience is 20 minutes of feeling distracted is you really getting the workout of finding your flashlight over and over and over again. And I love that meant that in the rest of your life, you remembered you had a flashlight and you can find it more readily. I think that's very cool. But just to kind of bring it to more an accessible way, it's like, yeah, we need those. It may seem obvious when we say it that way, but most of us don't do that. In fact, I know I didn't do it all those years ago.
Yeah, I think,
Sorry,
I've
you
met
wanted to
so
pivot
many
the
people.
conversation. So
Yeah, I met so many people who say like, "Oh, I started to meditate and I just was so distracted. So I just felt like it wasn't for me." And I always feel like, that would be like going to the gym and getting tired and feeling like working out is not for you because you got tired. It's like it just shows like, "Oh, actually, one, it's totally normal. Everybody experiences that. Two, it's a sign that, oh, there's room. This is why we train. This is why we need the reps, so to speak." And just seeing that, I think, one of the issues is that you see that like the imagery of meditation. Like if you ever go on a meditation retreat, you look around the room and it looks like everybody else is just like a little Buddha. They're all sitting there so serene, and it looks like their mind just must be so calm and peaceful. Actually, everybody's struggling with distraction, but they don't look like that. And so you look around and you feel like, oh, I'm the only one whose mind is just totally, gone all the time and struggle paying attention. But then you just hear from other people and you see, oh, this is just the human experience. You can read a meditation text from 2,000 years ago and people were struggling with this. And they didn't have smartphones and, smartwatches, and pinged with messages all the time. So normal. I wanted to ask you about that. What, being the so much of your personal and professional life devoted to attention in the way it has been, you've also been doing this in the era where smartphones, all this technology, and then even the algorithms, forget about the hardware, but the software, the algorithms that in many ways are designed on the science of attention and the neuroscience of attention in a not so healthy way. I'm
yeah.
just curious if you have any reflections, and having kids growing up in this era
Yeah.
as well, anything that you think might be helpful for people to understand how our our brain and the way it's wired is interfacing with all of this technology that we're surrounded with.
Right. I think most of us know the feeling of how it's being experienced. It doesn't feel so good. It does not feel so good. Meaning it is quite overwhelming and constant, right? So what you're describing is the attention economy.
Yeah.
This notion that the thing that is for sale, even though these apps may be free, especially social media apps, is your own, is our us as the users, our attention is the product that is
Yes,
for
the
sale.
commodity is
It
us,
is. It
our brain.
absolutely is. And I think that we need to know that we are up against a very rigged fight. Meaning, if we think we're going to be able to engage with technology, especially with because algorithms and the entire design of the product, meaning the social network platform, is designed to sell our attention, there's a lot of investment, whether that's teams of engineers, et cetera. And it's effective. I mean, meaning that, yeah, our attention is the thing that is on there for quite some time. The main point, though, is not so much that we're in this system. We are in this system. And it is, I think that we're going to need some intervention, not just from ourselves, but kind of structurally, kind of globally, culturally. And
Yeah,
some
you could see in
countries are doing
Australia. I
that.
mean, Australia just
Exactly.
banned social media for kids under 16.
Exactly. I think there's going to be some things that people are going to wake up to say, oh, it's not just annoying and uncomfortable and makes me feel bad. It's bad. It's not good for me to do this. And that it's not fair. It's not fair to be selling my attention when I'm not aware that that's what you're doing.
Hmm.
So there's a whole thing we could, and that's sort of more like the policy side of what I think is something that I'm quite interested in ensuring starts to happen. But we also have to remember something you said a few moments ago, which is that even if you go back thousands of years, and not just for monks in the East, but even monks in the West, some of the earliest texts of Western monks are these very sad stories about I left all of my worldly possessions. I'm in this monastery and I'm trying to connect with God, and all I'm doing is thinking about the fight I had with my fellow monk.
Yeah, you bring it
So
all with you.
this
Like you.
exactly. This notion that our distractibility is a modern problem is actually inaccurate. Distractibility and the vulnerability of our attention is a human problem. And we are prone to what's called mind wandering, having these off task thoughts during an ongoing task or activity. What's happened with social media is that, and technology, is that we have not just the internal distractibility that is a constant lure and has been for millennia, but we have the external distractibility that taps into all the things our attention is on the hunt for because of our evolutionary history. Novelty, you know, fear-based content, personally relevant information, familiarity. And if you next time you open up one of these social media apps, you'll see all of that is taking place and is part of what is drawing you in. So know what you're up against. You are in an unfair fight is kind of part of the takeaway. The other thing is that the same tools that you're going to use and have cultivated, and I think many people in this community of folks that are listening to us today have an interest in doing that, cultivating tools to have more agency over our own lives. Those tools can support us in the attention economy as well. And to not think that it's sort of a safe space to let our attention do what we want, but we want to be aware of where our mind is. We want to notice when we're off track. We want to be able to bring it back over and over again and be very protective of this precious brain resource that is so valuable that teams of engineers are spending their time trying to figure out how to sell it.
Yeah, even just some of the things that are just basic for the workings of attention that you just mentioned in passing, just like novelty, for example, or like duration and change, like the things that like our brain notices change, our brain likes new things, our brain, and once you just even know that basic, just those basic mechanics of attention, it's really empowering. When you're on your phone and you open an app and you can just see that that's like, oh, it's designed to do that. Like it doesn't want me to stay here for 10 minutes. It wants me to like, okay, 90 seconds and I'm moving on, 15 seconds and I'm moving on. Like it's the novelty, it's the change, it's the kind of stimulus capture, like all these different things. And then you can be empowered. You might still do it, you might not do it, but you can do it consciously versus just being, almost unconsciously driven by it. So I think a lot of your work is so empowering in the sense that it really is about the trainability, and that we can, I mean, yes, we need policy, and hopefully that will happen. Like, we need to work on all these levels. But until we do, and even when we do, we still need to be, we need to be in the driver's seat of our own minds. So I wanted to also talk about some of the amazing work you've done with people who are in the most stressful situations possible. You work with people where the stress and those external demands are not an aberration, but they're just part of the job, like you said, with firefighters as an example. Anything you could share? Just what have been the key insights that you've learned in working with all these really interesting populations, and what can it teach us about how we deal with stress and demanding situations in our own lives?
Yeah, yeah. So for sure. I mean, I think that that's what's been interesting. I mean, in fact, our work with firefighters, medical students, and other populations was motivated by the work that we did with military service members, for example. So finding solutions for folks in even more extreme contexts opens other people up to wanting to, sort of explore those solutions. The thing to know about our attention is that it is a limited resource, meaning we only have so much of it, and that it is going to get spent out almost moment by moment. So we just published a paper pretty recently. It was a kind of a review paper where I think there were over 10,000 participants across all the studies that we've reviewed. And what we know is that if you give somebody something like a 20-minute task and you just track the amount of mind wandering happening, meaning having these off-task thoughts, and these are tasks that are laboratory tasks. People are going to the lab. They know they're there to do an attention task. They know they're going to get paid or compensated in some way to do this attention task. They know people are watching their performance. And still, when they get in there, moment by moment, we see that mind wandering is increasing to the point at which about 10 minutes in, we are mind wandering 50% of the time.
Wow.
So
And that's amazing. People
even
are
moments,
watching you. It has everything you can construct for people to be at their best and to perform their best. And even
exactly.
then, it's like attention is
Exactly.
failing
And it's
right
not
away.
that they didn't care. I mean, they really, motivation does help, but it's still very, very fragile, this brain system. So what we notice is that in a 20-minute task, for example, performance gets worse and worse and worse over time. And that's just known in these sort of, when the level of demand stays constant. So I'm not trying to make it easier or harder. I'm just keeping it constant. Attentional performance goes down, and mind wandering goes up moment by moment. So that's important to know in the short term, that it's a sort of a ticking clock. And how do we reset this clock? Well, we disengage from that task. We might go do something else, come back again and do it. And there's some rhythmicity to how to do that. So the amount of time we spend on a task can make our attention vulnerable. And then if you take that out in terms of the time frame of demand, we see the same thing. So it's not just a 20-minute task, but if you look at people who've had demanding things they've got to do over days, weeks, and months, and we track their attention, what we see is that in the same way, from the beginning of that period of time of high demand to sort of 4 to 8 weeks later, attention is worse. And so I'll give you an example of groups that have shown this pattern. Undergrads over the academic semester. Anybody who's a student knows that the way you feel at the beginning of the semester is very different than at the end of the semester. And what do you have to do at the end of the semester? Usually final exams, right? So though the intention is it's a preparatory interval so that you can perform well when you're tested on it at the end, when it comes to our attention, it's actually worse off. And now it really counts. And unfortunately, we've seen that same pattern, that weeks of demand depletes attention in many contexts. And some of the most profound examples of this were actually our work with military service members. And again, this was in, several years ago now, when there were a lot of deployments happening. And what we realized, and what we saw, which was not a welcome thing to know, is that people that are enduring periods of time where they're just preparing to be deployed, so they're just going and doing some training for 4 weeks or so, from the beginning and end of that preparatory interval before they're deployed to a difficult place to do their job, their attention gets worse. And fire season for firefighters, in ongoing threat and demand, attention gets worse. So there is this catch-22 element about attention. The more you need it, the less available it is to you. And that issue is why I said we need to find a solution. And I wanted a solution even before I knew what it would be. I was hoping I'd find one. There were a lot of failed attempts, but the only thing that we have found that repeatedly and reliably protects and strengthens attention to date is contemplative practice, mindfulness practice, with loving kindness and some kind of compassion elements actually as well, because compassion training actually also reduces mind wandering. So that is a very powerful thing to know, that the thing that might solve and protect your attention over these periods of time that are enduring, requiring your enduring investment in it, are something as simple, and in our hands, we've found it to be as simple as practicing mindfulness meditation 12 minutes a day, 4 days a week. Seems to have this issue. So finding very practical solutions to problems that we've seen in almost every group we've looked at when they would say they're experiencing a high demand interval. And sort of my last comment on that would be that, part of the time when I'm talking about the kind of work we do, just like you were probably feeling when I spoke at Garrison, at the Mind and Life Institute, yeah, okay, I'm not in those circumstances. That's for them. They're doing some crazy military thing, or they're firefighters. I'm not a firefighter. But the lesson to take away, I think, is all of us in our lives, because we're human beings, are going to face intervals of high demand. Maybe we won't know that we're entering one. Maybe we won't know that it's around the corner and now we're going to have one for multiple weeks, but it will happen. And to me, it's sort of what motivates me every day. Like, I don't know what the demand is. I don't know what, if there's going to be circumstances where there's going to be a caretaking responsibility or health crisis or some other crisis in which I'm going to need my focus and it's got to stay there. So might as well prep and stay strong every single day. Might as well do the exercises that'll keep my attention available, buoyant, fully capable every day, especially if the investment of time I need daily is not overwhelming. It is possible to do this.
Yeah, it's so helpful, and some of the themes from your work to me that are most some of just like the basic insights. I mean, one, just the trainability, the plasticity of attention and the brain networks that underlie attention, just the fact that we can train it, it's possible. And a few other things that I think are important. One is that ideally we can train ourselves before we're in the middle of the storm. Ideally, if we can, like we're gonna face adversity in life, whether it's work or family or health or any number of things. Like, we're all gonna face adversity. You can wait till the adversity happens, but ideally, we're doing that ahead of time. So when it happens, it's somewhat a buffer. And I think your work, and I still remember the presentations that you gave those many years ago that kind of highlighted that. And that was just, simple in a way, but actually so helpful. And the fact that I think for a lot of times we don't do that. We actually wait till the crisis, and then we're like, oh crap, what do I do?
Yeah.
And it's not to say we shouldn't. If we haven't prepared, like, we should just throw up our hands. But it also shows that actually people, even in the midst of that incredibly stressful situation, you still can do it then if you haven't
Absolutely
done it prior. It's very much possible, actually. So your research kind of shows both of those things.
That's right. It does. Thank you for pointing that out. So the thing that, what is this term resilience comes up often in these contexts of there is some challenge. We kind of decline because of that challenge, because it's affecting us, and then we bounce back. And the first thing is, there are people that are intrinsically resilient, and there are people that are not intrinsically resilient. But the key feature of that is that you have to decline in order to bounce back. Mm-hmm. And what I'm suggesting, first point is, well, let's get pre-zilient in some sense. Let's not decline. Let's prepare every day. Let's exercise every day so that we stay stable no matter the challenge. We maintain our level of functioning. But the other point that you're making is, sure, but if you're up against a lot, it doesn't matter how much you practice or whatever you do, you're gonna have situations that are going to be demanding, and you will probably decline. What do you do in those moments? Well, can you up the ante? Can you do more? Can you orient? Can you do differently? Can you do anything in those moments that might support you? And the answer seems to be yes. Kind of to contrast two different experiences, or two different studies, actually. We did a study with Special Operations Forces, and this is a published paper, U.S. Special Operations Forces. So these are elite military folks. they are selected because they're asked to do some of the hardest jobs. They're selected for impeccable attention. And yet our project was to offer them mindfulness training um, for a variety of reasons, but to support their ongoing work. We were a little bit nervous because we're like, okay, look, if you're getting people that are already at the top of their game, what are we going to possibly do? And frankly, what we saw is that in the group that we didn't train, they really are different than the rest of us. They're being deployed and coming back, and they're just stable, and we're like, okay, that's the baseline. Whereas most of the other groups that we were looking at, different military service members in this preparatory period, and as like I said, even undergrads and fleets over other demanding intervals, people decline over a high demand interval. So our concern was, well, okay, can you get better than just stable if you're experiencing high demand? We offered them a mindfulness training program and the version of that program that required this 12 minutes, 4 days a week for 4 weeks. What we saw is those that practiced that actually got better than where they started. And the more they practiced in a daily way, the more they benefited. So to me, that was a really good indication that it doesn't matter what your starting point is, and it doesn't matter even if you're not experiencing high demand, you can actually improve. Your second point, just to close this part of the conversation out, is that, yeah, even if you are on the decline, and even if you're experiencing a lot of challenge, there's a way in which you can benefit from these practices, even in those moments. And probably the most salient example of that was one of the very first studies we did was with pre-deployment Marines back in 2006, I think, 6 or 7. And it was overall a very successful project. But what happened was that there were a group and what we did is we trained them as they were experiencing their pre-deployment military training, and then they were deployed to Iraq at that point. And for most of them, it was a very tough thing because they had been there 5 or 6 times. So it was a very difficult thing for the unit leaders, which is why they asked us to see. Many of the people took to heart and fully invested in our training. So what happened in overall is that the people that didn't get the training, they declined. The people that got the training and took it to heart and did what we asked, stayed stable, which was awesome. But there were a subset of those folks that sat in the class, but frankly thought what we're offering was complete BS and didn't want anything to do with it. And we're what we call our resistors, or not ready for change kind of individuals that really were not paying attention. What happened was that, I found this out later, is that they then were deployed to the war zone. And what was happening there was that they were noticing, these group of individuals, that unlike their colleagues who did our training, and they were coming back from very, very intense circumstances, but still able to calm down enough, stay regulated, and fall asleep at night, these guys were not able to do that. They were rattled, and their ability to function was compromised. And they saw that it was very different than other folks. So they actually contacted our trainer while they were in Iraq and said, look, we didn't really buy what you were saying before, but can you just start training us? She actually gave them some booster sessions, reminded them of what was being said. And what happened with those folks is they started incorporating it there and benefited. And we sort of see that in some of our data as well. So, if it can be helpful to people in those extreme circumstances, and by the way, what they wanted to do that for was so that they were there really for peacekeeping in some sense, whatever you want to call that, for that time, working with training Iraqis in country. So it's a complex mission, but they said that even though it was challenging for us, we wanted to make sure that we could be present with our colleagues, train them as we needed to be, not be dysregulated ourselves. And we weren't able to do that until we started practicing while we were there.
Yeah, I mean, hearing those stories, I mean, it was that. I think you were probably right in the middle of this research when I first heard you speak. And yeah, I mean, like many of us, I just had a lot of, I was not happy about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I had all sorts, there was all sorts of questions I had. But I think, hearing you speak and the stories totally changed my mind. And it just, a very simple thing. I'm just thinking, okay, these are real people over there. There's the individual level, and then there's the systemic and just the whole effort.
Yeah.
Is it better that these people, for them or for the whole situation, that they have training in this, that they have the ability to stay
Right.
grounded, that they can, and there's some, kindness, and and hearing the personal stories just helped me see that, oh, this is just so clearly better. You
Yeah.
imagine even something that I, might personally have kind of my own qualms about or ethical concerns about, but you just inject more awareness and kindness and attention and the ability just to stay regulated and grounded. Like you inject that into any situation and it's obviously just going to be better. It's going to be less suffering and more, less negative outcomes and more positive outcomes. And anyways, I just want to thank you for helping me
Yeah,
kind
no,
of see
thank
that
you
more
for saying
clearly.
that. And I'll just tell you, I mean, your qualms, et cetera, many people share, including me. I grew up, I was born in the town that Gandhi's ashram is in.
Mm,
Nonviolence is sort of at the core of like my family's whole way of being, my own way of being. I would never have thought that I would be not only not, I never thought I would study meditation. I never thought I would work with the military. But what I've come to understand in my work with these groups is that in many ways, yes, as you said, being discerning, being regulated, practicing in our own mind how to de escalate, how to see fully, how to take others' perspectives. These are powerful tools that all of us need. And those that are working in these difficult circumstances that truly have weapons that could wipe out entire villages, you want those people to have all of those skills so that errors don't happen, so that as much as possible, ethical codes are maintained. And that when there's suffering that is endured to them or by them, they have a way of kind of figuring out what to do. And to kind of fast forward to what's happening right now, a lot of this work that we did with a lot of different groups, and remembering that militaries do what their country's political will it requires them to do. It's a very complex set of things. Fast forward to what's happening right now. I was very privileged to be able to attend a meeting where there were folks. We were working with the people within Ukraine right now,
mm,
and when there are difficult situations in which it's not somewhere else to somebody else, but it's happening in your own country, and you are the front line. How do you deal? How do you deal with the scale of
and they have
what
like continuous
happens?
deployment in some. I mean, they just have these
Not just continuous
horrific
deployment, but
situations.
everybody is deployed. The entire
Yeah.
country is deployed, and it is a different kind of set of circumstances. And I think that part of that is to remember we want a world in which there is peace. We want a world in which there's no conflict, and we want a world in which people can live in a way that is caring and compassionate. And I would say most of my direct experiences with people that are in military service, they share that deeply because, frankly, when there's instability and when there's lack of peace, it's them that are the ones that are seeing that happen in the face of it.
Mm.
So there's a lot of complexity around all of this, but I just want to bring it back to: would you rather be regulated and compassionate in your orientation toward what you experience or not? And
Yeah.
I lean on discernment, de-escalation, care, and compassion is what I've learned these practices cultivate in me. It's what our research says is happening when people practice it. And that's what I'm offering in the best way we possibly can, given the complexity of the container we're all living.
Such a beautiful note to end on. I know we're almost out of time, but there was some great questions. Maybe just if we can do a little speed round. One question was just about any books or failing that, scientific papers that you would recommend about the neuroscience of emotions. Just to say, of course, there's your book, Peak Mind, which I highly recommend people check out. But what would you say if you were to have a short list of books or resources that you think would be helpful for people to learn about this stuff?
That's really easy. Go to the Center for Healthy Minds.
Thank you.
There are many places
I should
that
say that actually,
you.
Amishi, you're one of the experts on our Healthy Minds app. You were when we thought about who are the real world experts we want to feature in the Healthy Minds app. You were a very obvious and first choice. So
I appreciate that.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
so
it was fun to collaborate on that. Thankfully, that question being asked is such a great one that you want to learn, that you have that curiosity. And we are at a moment where there are so many resources available. Some of the links that I know that Tergar is very involved in and can pass along will have a lot of those resources. And to lean in on the science to ensure that what you understand is actually based on science is heartening that I would get that question, because that's what we want. We want evidence informed, evidence backed approaches. And these practices that we've been talking about are growing in the evidence base that supports not only their effectiveness, but the packaging and the delivery structure in which by which this can be done that is efficient and accessible, scalable, feasible for more and more people is what I think is probably the most exciting part of what's happening now.
Mm-hmm. So helpful. Well, Amishi, another big bow of gratitude for taking time out of your busy schedule and out of your weekend. But more than that, really just for the work you've done for decades and the impact it's had on, so many people and just our culture and society at large. Just, really grateful that you're on this planet doing this work, this pioneering work that you've done. And just you could just sense your presence, comes through as well. So yeah, thank you for taking
Thank you,
the time
Court.
to be
I
with
mean, I
us.
would say right back at you, and frankly, to everybody that's listening to us, thank you for taking time out of your day and being willing to listen to this kind of a conversation. It's the kind of thing that gives me hope that if those of us that share the value and the aspirations that we share, we can continue to thrive and flourish in our world.
Fantastic. So I think Beth is going to pop back on. Just a quick plug for Amishi's book, Peak Mind, and also, as we mentioned a few times, Push-Ups for the Mind, Amishi's new app. So in addition to some Tergar offerings, which I also highly recommend, definitely worth checking those out. And Beth, turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for such a fascinating conversation and inspiring. I love to start my weekend with a little hope. So thank you both very, very much. And so I'm just going to wrap up by sharing some information about some things that are coming up at Tergar. So we'll have some slides and we'll share that information. Let's see, I'm in the wrong place. There we go. So for those of you who are new to meditation or wanting to go deeper, the Joy of Living program is an ideal starting point. And it was designed by Mingyur Rinpoche. It offers a structured path from basic awareness to deeper insight into the mind. And now this is very exciting. You can experience the program live, our online course, but with a cohort of students going along the journey with you to help you to integrate the teachings into daily life. So there's live online sessions with Tergar guides and a supportive learning community. Our next cohort kicks off January 11th, so you can still join. Visit joy.tergar.org/connect for more information. And the next slide, this is it's a little story about our cohort. We introduced that early this year in 2025, and we've just had tremendous response. Practicing live with a guide, with a supportive community, it feels very different from practicing alone. And so people have said that the elements that helped the most were the weekly structure, the live sessions, regular check-ins, etc. It's giving you consistency and accountability needed to build a real meditation habit. I just love this short quote from Mari, who took part in our first cohort, and she's still taking part in now in our second Joy of Living Level 2 cohort. You can read the full story at our blog. Let's go to the next slide, please. If you aren't able to join the cohort, or you just prefer doing things on your own, you can join the self-paced Joy of Living online. It lets you learn and practice from anywhere in a way that fits your life and schedule. So it's ideal for building a habit, finding more balance, reconnecting with your own innate sense of ease. You'll learn directly from Mingyur Rinpoche through videos, guided meditations, etc. And you can also connect with the broader community through our discussion forums. Next slide, please. And A unique benefit of being a Joy of Living member is the ability to schedule one-on-one meetings with Tergar guides. And these meetings offer personalized support and space to ask your questions. You can also join the community circle live sessions with Tergar instructor Tim Olmstead. This is a relaxed, open environment for sharing experience and receiving guidance from Tim and the community. So we do invite you to visit joy.tergar.org to learn more, begin your meditation journey with Mingyur Rinpoche, Tergar guides, and our entire community. And one last slide, speaking of community. If you enjoyed today's webinar and you're interested in starting or deepening your meditation practice, you don't have to do it on your own. Being a part of a community can be the best way to keep your practice alive. Tergar has many practice groups around the world, meeting in person, online, or in hybrid formats. You can find a group near you by scanning the QR code that you see on your screen, or visit the Tergar website, tergar.org, and click on the community tab. If you're already connected informally with others who are interested in meditation, we offer lots of support for those who want to start their own practice group. So if you're interested in that, please send an email to us. You can email communityteam@tergar.org for more information. So that's it for me in terms of the announcements. So I just wanted to say a big thank you once again to Cortland and to Amishi and to Jiva and Lucy in the background, helping to take care of the tech side of everything. And yeah, just thank you. Thanks everyone for your time and attention. And we wish you all the best in your personal journey. And we hope to see you again at another Tergar event in the future. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.